They didn't have a romance, but they healed something in each other that no one else could. For months, she would come back and sit in the same chair. Always at the same time. Always with her eyes full of unsaid things. I witnessed a love story that marked me forever and will surprise you. Because sometimes, the people who know the most about a love are the ones who just stayed. I'm just a chair. Old wood, high back, arms worn by time. I was placed in this room many years ago, between a corner plant and a small table with magazines that almost no one reads. The floor creaks slightly when someone passes by, the clock on the wall is always 2 minutes slow, and the light that enters through the high windows is filtered, as if it had learned to be discreet. This is a clinic where time moves differently. People arrive with tired eyes, restrained gestures, and hearts that do not show themselves immediately. No one rushes, but no one wants to stay for long either. There is a certain silence that lives here. A type of silence that does not constrain, but simply invites. To reflect, to wait, to breathe. It was an ordinary Tuesday when she arrived. She was wearing a beige coat, a scarf around her neck, and a look that seemed to carry too many memories for so few words. When she sat on me, she did so delicately, as if she didn't want to leave a mark. But she did. Not on the wood, in the atmosphere. She stood there in silence, with her hands folded in her lap, looking at her feet. As if she were holding something she wasn't ready to tell yet. Soon after, he walked in. His hair was a little disheveled, his eyes carrying a mixture of kindness and restlessness. He wore simple clothes, but he carried a discreet weight with him, as if he were trying to recover from something he hadn't said out loud. When he saw her sitting there, he hesitated for a second. And then, as if something was pulling him slowly, he sat down in the chair next to her. They didn't exchange words. They didn't need to. The space between them was filled with a rare calm. Each one was immersed in their own thoughts, but aware of the other's presence as if they were familiar. It was as if they already knew each other. Not from before, but from within. That morning, no one said anything. She was absent-mindedly fiddling with the ring on her finger. He was slowly leafing through a magazine without really reading it. But something was forming. A kind of silent connection, the kind that doesn't ask permission to begin. And I, in the middle of the two, was the first to notice. The following Tuesday was the same. And the next one too. They started arriving at the same time, between 9 and 9:15. She always had that air of someone who hides more than she shows. He, with that silence that doesn't push people away, on the contrary, brings them closer. They sat in the same places. And so, the waiting room became the only place where they existed at the same time. As the weeks went by, her gestures changed tone. She started carrying a book. She never opened it, but held it as if she needed something in her hands to control her heart. He started bringing her 2 coffees, one for him, the other that he discreetly left on the little table, closer to her. She started accepting them with a small but genuine smile. Time seemed different inside. The ticking of the clock lost its rhythm when they were together. The walls seemed to hear and store everything. And I, unable to speak, recorded every look, every pause, every involuntary gesture. It wasn't love yet, but it was a clear affection. A mutual presence. A love that grew timidly but firmly. Like a flower that sprouts in a crack in the concrete, without fanfare, without permission, without fear. One day he spoke first. The wait always seems longer when you're alone. She looked at him and smiled. But there are days when sharing the wait changes everything. It was the first real exchange between them, and also the first time I felt them relaxed together, as if they had found shelter in each other. As if that room, with its smell of old paper and its soft light, was the only place where they could be just presence. They went on like this for weeks. Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Wednesdays. The frequency was not set, but fate seemed to make a point of synchronizing them. And when one arrived first, the other came right after. It was rare that this didn't happen. And so, that feeling became routine. A routine made of comfortable silence, brief smiles, shared tea, and an old chair that witnessed everything without ever saying a word. But the heart never stays quiet for long. And sooner or later, it wants to name what it feels. And that's where the dilemmas begin. That's when love, so beautiful in silence, has to deal with the world. And that's when their story began to change. At the clinic, time seemed to pass differently for them. While the clock's hands marked the minutes as usual, what was happening between them could not be measured exactly. It was something that grew inside, like someone who keeps a good memory and takes care of it day after day. They began to arrive almost always at the same time, as if life had silently organized them for that brief but necessary reunion. There was no longer the strangeness of the beginning. The presence of one was expected by the other, even if nothing was said out loud. And I, there in the middle, was like the calm bank of a river where the current of the outside world could not reach. Their conversations began to take shape. Nothing extraordinary. They talked about the weather, books, favorite coffees, childhood memories. But there was a delicacy in the way they listened to each other, as if each sentence were a jewel being carefully delivered. He had a light laugh that emerged little by little. She had a way of looking at him when she paid attention, as if she were diving into the other's soul. And together, they created a space where time seemed less heavy. Some days, she would arrive a little more dejected. Her eyes lowered, her steps slow. He noticed, but he didn't force it. He would just stand there by her side. He would say good morning as if to say, "I'm here." And that was enough. On other days, he would be the one who arrived more quietly, and she, with a simple gesture, like adjusting the scarf around her neck or offering him tea first, would show that she understood. As the weeks passed, the connection between them deepened. Silence was no longer an absence of words. It was full presence. It was the kind of silence that only exists between those who trust, between those who understand that not everything needs to be said. When one didn't come, the other waited a few more minutes. And when they met again, there was a smile that carried longing, even if disguised. One of those days, after a particularly rainy morning, she arrived with swollen eyes. She sat down on me more slowly, adjusted her coat as she always did, and kept her eyes fixed on the ground. He arrived shortly after, noticed it immediately, and remained silent for long minutes by her side. Then he simply said, "There are days when the world weighs more heavily, but it passes." She looked at him with tears in her eyes and replied, "I just wish I didn't feel what I feel." That sentence hung in the air. And I understood. They knew. They both knew what was happening between them. And they also knew that it wasn't simple. With each new encounter, the affection stopped being just tenderness. It became a desire to stay longer. A desire to know the details. Curiosity about the other person's life. She started bringing books to recommend to him. He started choosing the days to come according to her schedule. And when she smiled more, he seemed to breathe easier. It was late one morning, on any given Wednesday, that the dilemma finally manifested itself. She mentioned, softly, that her husband had returned from a trip. That their conversations were quieter than ever. That she no longer knew how to be in their marriage without feeling absent from herself. He listened attentively. He didn't judge her. He didn't interrupt her. When she finished, he simply said, "Maybe you're just remembering who you were before you forgot yourself." She smiled with teary eyes. "And you helped me remember." At that moment, the air became denser. Love was there, so evident, so sweet, but so trapped between the limits of what could and could not be experienced. And yet, they kept coming, day after day, sharing coffees, conversations and silences, creating a story made of intervals, those minutes between one appointment and another, between one obligation and another, between what they feel and what the world allows. But each time they sat down, the touch of their eyes was longer, their breathing more measured, and their hearts more divided. Because loving in silence, when you can't live that love completely, is like trying to hold water in your hands. At some point, it slips away. And when it slips away, it starts to hurt. At the clinic, the meetings continued. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes Wednesdays when one of them missed the other more than the other. And each meeting carried more than the last. More silence. More tenderness. More care with what was left unsaid. Because now they both knew there was love there. And there was also a limit that hurt. She began to approach more hesitantly. She took a long time to sit down, as if her own steps were too heavy to enter that place that had become both a refuge and a threat at the same time. I looked at her with affection, but also with sadness. Like someone who finds exactly what they were looking for at the moment when they cannot accept it. He changed too. He was quieter, more reserved. He smiled sweetly, but his eyes carried a discreet weariness. It was the kind of exhaustion that only those who love quietly understand. The exhaustion of hoping for the impossible every day. It was on a cloudy morning that everything began to fall apart. She arrived earlier. She sat on me with her body tense, as if that space now hurt. She had a letter in her purse. She took it out slowly, looked at the envelope for several minutes, then put it back. She was crying, but without sound. The kind of crying that happens inside, where no one sees, except me, who felt the slight tremor of her arms against me. He arrived shortly after. When he saw her, he stopped for a moment. There was something different about her. Something resolved and hurt at the same time. He sat down beside her, as always, and waited for her to say something. But she didn't. A few minutes passed in silence. Until she spoke without looking at him. "I love your presence. And that's the problem." He took a while to answer. "I love yours too. And that's what sustains me, and what holds me back." She turned her face to him, her eyes full but steady. "I can't go on like this. It's not fair to me, or to you, or to him." The last word was spoken with pain, but without anger, only with the weight of someone who still carries a commitment that she could not abandon. She was still married. There was still an invisible alliance there, made more of duty than of love, but which still bound her. He nodded. "I know. And yet I came." She smiled, "Little one. So did I." They were silent for a few more moments. Then she put her hand on the book in her lap and said, "I'm going to stop coming." "I understand," he replied. She stood up. She looked at him with such affection that it could have filled the entire space. And she said, "You helped me remember who I am. And I will never forget that." He didn't try to stop her. He didn't ask her to stay. He just stood there as she walked away, step by step, until she disappeared down the hallway. And I, who witnessed every look, every gesture, every second in which the two lived this love without living, felt what few understand, that sometimes the purest form of love is letting go. In the following days, he kept coming. For a few weeks, he would sit in the same place, staring at the door as if he were still waiting for something to happen. He would stay for a few minutes, drink a coffee by himself, read a random page. Then he would leave, until he stopped coming too. The room became emptier. The sounds returned to what they were before. And I, a chair, remained there, marked not by their absence, but by the presence they left. Because love, even when it cannot stay, leaves marks that time cannot erase. They loved each other silently, respectfully, incompletely. And yet, truly. And that was beautiful, that was real. After she left, the room changed. There was no renovation, no furniture change, no new scent in the air. But it changed. The weather became harsher, and the silence, drier. She left gently, but her absence was hard. Not just for him, for me too. The following Tuesday he didn't come. Nor on Thursday. But I knew he would come back, even if just one more time. Because when something touches you so deeply, it's hard to just let it go. The next week he showed up. He was paler. His eyes were tired, like someone who had spent days trying to pretend he didn't miss someone, and had failed. He sat down next to me with a long sigh. He didn't bring coffee. He didn't bring a book. He no longer had her in his eyes, but he had her absence in his chest. She stood there for a few minutes. She looked at the place where she used to sit. And then she spoke softly, as if she were talking to me. "I don't know if I'll be able to forget." He stayed a little longer. Then he got up. He looked back, hesitated for a moment, and left. And he never came back. The weeks passed. The patients were nothing more than hurried faces. The room resumed its normal rhythm, with its slow footsteps, the receptionist's whispers, and the exchange of outdated magazines. But for me, nothing was the same. I could still remember the way she adjusted her coat, the way he ran his finger along the rim of the paper cup, the way they looked at each other between sentences. All of that was there. And even if no one else noticed, I could feel it. There was a living absence in that space. Like when a song ends, but the sound still vibrates in the air for a while. A few months had passed since I had last seen her. Time had slowed down in the room. The air seemed denser, as if it carried her absence in the corners, in the furniture, in the light. And then, on a random Tuesday morning, she came back. She was different. There was no more urgency in her eyes, no more sadness in her shoulders. She entered with firm steps, dressed simply and lightly. Her hair was a little shorter, her eyes were lighter, not in color, but in the way she looked. Like someone who had finally learned to see inside. She sat down on me with the same delicacy as before, but now without hesitation, like someone who no longer runs away from her own story. He was holding an envelope. It was him, the same envelope she had so often carried, hesitantly, and never delivered. At that moment, he walked in. She hadn't seen him for even longer, but the recognition was immediate. His body was thinner, his beard was unshaven, but his gaze was the same, only calmer, more aware. When he saw her there, he stopped for a moment. She looked up and smiled. A small smile, but genuine. There was no surprise, no shock. There was understanding. He approached her slowly. He didn't ask her anything. He sat down next to her, in the other chair, just like old times. For a few minutes they sat in silence. Then she handed him the envelope. He hesitated, then took it and opened it. Inside was a letter, but it wasn't a letter of goodbye. It was a letter of peace. She talked about what she felt, what she experienced, what she didn't say. But mainly about what she had learned from all of that. She talked about love, but also about responsibility, about forgiveness and about time. She talked about how sometimes loving means not acting. It means recognizing that love, no matter how true it may be, doesn't always fit in the now. He read it to the end, his eyes brimming with tears. He closed the envelope carefully, as if closing a cycle, and took her hand. "Thank you for coming back," he said. "I needed it, but not for us." "For me," she replied. They stayed like that for a few more minutes. Hands clasped, silence between them. And then they stood up. Before leaving, she looked at me and for a brief moment, her fingers ran over my wooden arm, as if thanking me for every memory stored there. He did the same, a brief gesture but full of gratitude. And then, together, they walked to the door. Not as lovers, not as strangers, but as two beings who found each other at the right time, even though they could not stay. That morning, the sun came in differently through the windows. The light spread over me, warming the old wood with a warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. And I understood that some loves don't last, but they heal. Some stories don't have a continuation, but they do have an end. And that end was beautiful. The days are silent again. The same walls, the same plant in the corner, the same clock that insists on being 2 minutes late. Patients continue to arrive, wait, leave. Some talk on the phone, others just breathe deeply. The routine hasn't changed, but I have. Because now I carry something different inside me. I was the place where two hearts met without needing to touch. Where a love grew, blossomed and knew when to stop. Where silence said more than 1,000 words. Where time did not heal but revealed. I am made of wood, but I carry feelings as if I were made of skin. Because when someone sits on me with an open heart, I hear it. And when two hearts beat close to each other, even in silence, I feel it. Many will sit here after them. Many will come for just a few minutes, and will leave without knowing about me. But I will know, because there are stories that don't need to be said out loud to exist. That woman touched me as if she were thanking me without words. That man sighed as if he were searching for answers in his own chest. And I was just a support, an object, perhaps. But I was the stage for a love that, even without a happy ending, had a beautiful outcome. They didn't kiss, they didn't run away together, they didn't break old promises. But they recognized each other, they healed each other, and they moved on. And that, for me, is more than enough. Today, as the morning light touches my seat, I close the eyes I don't have, but I imagine. And I think that maybe one day, someone will sit here again and find peace. Because some places hold more than memories, they hold feelings. And I, even without a voice, have something to say. If I could speak, I would say that true love is not always the one that lasts, but it is the one that transforms.